we are reading, today many are absent. But Shilpa, okay. So we have to read today from only when the individual being.
Shall I read since I have the book?
Very good. Go ahead.
Only when the individual being begins to perceive and acknowledge in his acts the value of the self in others, as well as the power and needs of his own ego, begins to perceive universal nature behind his own workings, and through the cosmic Godheads, get some glimpse of the one and the infinite. Is he on his way to the transcendence of his limitation by the ego and the discovery of his soul? He begins to discover a law other than that of his desires, to which his desires must be more and more subordinated and subjected. He develops the purely egoistic into the understanding and ethical being. He begins to give more value to the claims of the self in others and less to the claims of his ego. He admits the strife between egoism and altruism, and by the increase of his altruistic tendencies, he prepares the enlargement of his own consciousness and being. He begins to perceive nature and divine powers in nature, to whom he owes sacrifice, adoration, obedience, because it is by them and by their law that the workings both of the mental and the material world are controlled. And he learns that only by increasing their presence and their greatness in his thought and will and life can he himself increase his powers, knowledge, right action, and the satisfaction which these things bring to him. Thus, he adds the religious and supraphysical to the material and egoist sense of life and prepares himself to rise through the finite to the infinite.
Yeah. So the subject is egoism. Remember, and is sacrifice. You have to do the sacrifice to the divine to be able to go out of your ignorance into the knowledge. That is the main thing. Tarika, good morning. So, so this is what now he is saying, that there are stages in which this is done. He has already told us that the one who has an ego and does not do sacrifice, he is compelled to do sacrifice by the laws of nature. Okay? You are forced to give yourself partly to, or whatever you have, to the universe. Then if you do it willingly, you get the benefit of the sacrifice. So that this is what he's saying, and there are 3 or 4 stages. The first stage is ego, okay? The second stage is altruism, humanitarianism, charity, and the next stage is religious, and the last stage is spiritual. Then you lose your ego entirely. So this is what he is explaining in this paragraph. So let's have a look at what he said. Only when the individual being begins to perceive and acknowledge in his acts the value of the self of others, as well as the power and needs of his own ego, begins to perceive universal nature behind his own workings, and through the cosmic Godheads, gets some glimpse of the one and the infinite, is he on his way to the transcendence of his limitation by the ego and the discovery of his soul. Huge sentence as usual instead of though. So what he's saying is that you are on the path of discovery of your soul only when you start beginning to lose your ego. And when you start losing your ego, in the beginning, in all normal human beings, the ego is very valid and they pursue their own motives. And you have to do that if you are at that level. Okay? But the moment you realize that there is a limit to your egoism and that you have to take into consideration the existence of others, then already that's the first stage. But then you realize that the others not only you have to take into consideration, but you have to also give them a certain value, that they also have a role to play in your own life. Just as we say, we need our servant, we need our neighbor, we need our tailor, we need our doctors. So we depend on the universe in which all these people are there. So you start giving a true value. You need your accountant, and etc., etc., etc. You need your teacher. So this is what Sandra is saying in this para. So once you realize that the others also have a role in your life, and you give them their true value, not dismiss them. You know, uh, we even do that with the servants. No? Nowadays things are changing, and people earlier used to be very dismissive about their servants, treat them very badly, not pay them enough. So this is also not right. Absolutely, you have to give full value to their work. They are helping you after all. They are part of your life. So this is what Sandra is saying. But he has to also know his own needs of his own ego. Okay, you need certain things. You need food, you need service, you need clothes, you need so many things. So your own requirements also have to be taken into consideration, but you have to give full value to the others. Now we'll read one sentence we read. I'm reading each sentence and seeing what we have discussed just now makes sense or not. Only when the individual being is a human being, we are talking here of human beings only, begins to perceive and acknowledge in his acts the value of the self in others, as well as the power and needs of his own ego, there's a balance between it. Begins to perceive universal nature behind his own workings. All the others whom you are giving value to, they are in the universal nature. And you realize the more you become wide-minded and the more you start seeing things in their true light, you start seeing that there is all these people whom we need are in the universe. So actually behind all these people also, there is a universal force which is there helping you or obstructing you also sometimes. Okay, so universal nature behind his own workings, and through the cosmic godheads get some glimpse of the infinite. Okay, this is already he is coming to spiritual realization, because the cosmic god we don't see, but you have to see the cosmic gods only when you are in the level 2. You can't see the cosmic gods if you are not in level 2. Okay, so he's saying is he on the way to the transcendence of his limitation? What is the limitation? Your complete imprisonment in the body, life, and that's your limitation. And you have to transcend that. You have to go out of the body, mind, life. When you do that, then you get you can go to the level 2. You get to the, normally it's a transcendent consciousness or the Brahmic consciousness. Okay. So, and you discover, since they use the word here, discovery of a soul, but here if you say transcendence of limitation of ego, by the soul means the self. Okay. You are not gone inward, but you have gone up. You have transcended. He begins to discover a law other than that of his desires. Okay. There is the law of his desires is, there are laws in the level 1. There are physical laws, there are vital laws, and there are mental laws. Everything operates by laws. Okay. So, but we discovered that there is a universal law also. Universal at the physical level we all know. Okay. Gravitation is one. Okay. Then all the laws of heating, all the laws of physics are in the physical. But don't think that there are no laws in the vital world also. There are laws that operate. there are systems. And that is what is, when you have occult power, okay, you have understood the laws of the vital world. And you are also actually using them. Sometimes you are using them without the knowledge because you just have the power. So laws are there everywhere. And laws are there at the level 1, there are laws at the level 2. Where do the laws disappear? Only in level 3, because there's total freedom. Law and freedom are opposites. Okay? The moment there are laws, they are limiting you. They are telling you, you can do this, you can't do that. So there is a limitation of freedom. Only at the highest level, freedom is total and laws disappear. Is you, when you start becoming a little wider and a little more wiser, you realize that there are universal laws, and those laws also are applying to you. Okay? That's what he begins to discover a law other than that of his desires, to which his desires must be more and more subordinated and subjected. If you remember also the standards of conduct, there's some echo of that in this para that we are reading now. Okay? So you come from the standard of ego to the standard of the, you are realizing that the social members also have a certain value of their own. This is the proper value. He begins to discover a law other than that of his desires, to which his desires must be more and more subordinated and subjected. You have to control and limit your desires when it clashes with others. He develops the purely egoistic into the understanding and ethical being. So now he comes to the moral standard. So he said, yes, in so many sentences, he has come from the law of ego to the law of society and to the law of the ethical being, morality. Okay? He begins to give more value to the claims of the self in others. Okay? You understand more. There is a very interesting case in, I think, Ramakrishna's life. I've read about it. There was one man who was all the time giving more importance to the others than to himself. Okay? Even his family would suffer. If anyone wanted money, he would go and give. If anyone wanted service, he would give. But that is excessive, because then you sometimes deprive your own family and yourself also. Know very carefully what Sridhar is saying in the third line of this para, and needs of his own ego. You have to take care of your own ego also, because if you go on denying yourself, you won't develop yourself. You'll go only in one direction. So this case that I am talking about, he was absolutely directed outwards to everybody, very helpful to everybody, but paying no attention to himself. It's okay from one point of view, but you have to also develop yourself. Okay? So that's why Sridhar added that, and needs of his own ego. There has to be a balance always. Okay? Then now we come back to the lower one. He begins to give more value to the claims of the self in others. Note, not claims of the others in outer nature, but claims of the self in others, and less the claims of his ego. He admits the strife between egoism and altruism. Altruism is philanthropy, charity, okay, helping others. Okay. By the increase of his altruistic tendency, he prepares. There is a lot of disturbance from Shiva's house.
Yes.
I don't know why. Maybe they're cleaning vessels.
Shall I? Please. Shall I read?
No, wait.
Please mute. There's a lot of sound.
Okay. Then he's saying the altruistic tendency he prepares for enlightenment of his own being. Now, they're very interesting, because in my street itself, I see that there are many pavement dwellers, at least 3 or 4. Okay. And there are people who come on their scooter and give them packets of food every day. There used to be one man who used to come and even distribute money to these 3, 4 pavement dwellers in my street. And I have seen rickshawalas also sharing their food with crows. Okay, so sometimes even with dogs, they do that with dogs also. You will see very often these rickshawalas, they need companionship, and if they don't get human companionship, they migrate to animals. Okay, this is not uncommon. So this is, even that at that level, this tendency can be there. Yes. Strife between egoism and altruism, and by the increase of his altruistic tendency, he prepares the enlargement of his own consciousness and being. When you do that, your own consciousness also is enlarging, going outwards and not going inwards, concentrating only on the ego. He begins to perceive nature and divine powers in nature to whom he owes sacrifice, adoration, obedience, because it is by them and by their law that the workings both of the mental and the material world are controlled. And he learns that only by increasing their presence and their greatness in his thought and will and life can he himself increase their power, his powers, knowledge, right action, and the satisfactions which these things bring to him. Now, you can also note that even in the earliest of times, even those who are savages, they realize that nature is there giving them their food and giving them rain and giving all heat, all these things. So very clearly, even at that, and that's why they worship the sun, they worship the rain. So even at that level, it starts understanding that there are huge nature forces which are helpful to you. So it's very common now. There are so many people who worship the sun, they worship the rain, they worship gods. It migrates to sometimes to other gods also, like Ganesh, okay, and so many others. People go to Tirupati. So all these are the beginnings. They are only the beginnings, not the end. The end is very far away. So this is this is what Sri is saying, and learns that only by increasing their presence and greatness in it, you should recognize that the universe is playing a big role in your own life, but at which level? At the mental level, at the vital level, and even at the material level. Okay? And he learns that only by increasing their presence and this greatness, they are all great powers in his thought and will and life. Thought is mind, will is to a certain extent the vital, and life is the lower vital in you. He himself increase his powers. Only by giving to others can your own power and your own consciousness develop. Okay? Knowledge increase his powers, his knowledge, his right action, and the satisfactions which these things bring to him. Thus, he adds the religious and supraphysical to the material and egoistic sense of life and prepares himself to rise through the finite to the infinite. So he has given you, as I said, 4 stages. First there is the ego, then there is the altruism and you charity and philanthropy, then you come to the moral standards, and then finally you come to the spiritual. So in a way, this para that we read just now, in a very guarded way, in a very not open way, is a summary of the chapter, the standards of conduct in synthesis. Okay, so now we go to the next one, but this is only a long intermediate stage. He put in one para and we read that, oh, it's a question of only very quickly I can get to the spiritual. It's not that. Very, very slow and long process. So we can go to the next one. The para, it's about 2/3 of a page. So who will read? Anyone? Okay. Okay, Tarika, go ahead.
But this is only a long intermediate stage. It is still subject to the law of desire, to the centrality of all things in the conceptions and needs of his ego, and to the control of his being, as well as his works by nature. Though it is a regulated and governed desire, a clarified ego, and a nature more and more subtilized and enlightened by the sattvic, the highest natural principle. All this is still within the domain, though the very much enlarged domain of the mutable, finite, and personal. The real self knowledge and consequently the right way of works lies beyond. For the sacrifice done with knowledge is the highest sacrifice, and that alone brings a perfect working. That can only come when he perceives that the self in him and the self in others are one being, and this self is something higher than the ego, an infinite, an impersonal, a universal existence in whom all move and have their being. When he perceives that all the cosmic gods to whom he offers his sacrifice are forms of one finite, infinite Godhead, and when again, leaving all his limited and limiting conceptions of that one Godhead, he perceives him to be the supreme and ineffable deity who is at once the finite and the infinite, the one self and the many, beyond nature, though manifesting himself through nature, beyond limitation by qualities, though formulating the power of his being through infinite quality. This is the Purushottama, to whom the sacrifice has to be offered, not for any transient personal fruit of works, but for the soul's possession of God and in order to live in harmony and union with the divine.
Okay, so very interesting para. We'll have a quick look at it. It's already 8:23, but we can finish the para today. But this is only a long intermediate stage. So, which is the stage? All these, the ego, and then the social laws, and then the moral laws, and finally you come to the spiritual laws. So, this is a long intermediate stage. It is still subject to the law of desire. So even when you recognize that the others have a role in your life, a very important role in your life, still your desire is still there. It doesn't disappear. In fact, sometimes the desire goes on for a long time. Okay? Even the nature of the desire has to change. Desire itself may remain. Okay? When desire for the divine comes in, you can call it aspiration, but still, in a certain sense, it's a desire. That's why the highest level self-sale is not even to have the desire for liberation. Okay? That is the highest. You surrender yourself fully to the divine and make no demands on him. You do what you want with me. I have nothing. I'm just surrendering to you. You do what you want with me. So even the desire for getting progress also disappears. That's the highest state. So the law of desire is still subject to law of desire. To the centrality of all things in the conception and needs of the ego. So centrality of all things. Everything you refer back to your own self, your own ego. Okay? Everything, whatever is useful to you, that is valid for you, nothing else. That's what it means. Centrality, you know the word centrality, very interesting. Whatever is there in the universe, whatever, it always refers back to yourself. Okay? It's so central to yourself. The needs of the ego and the control of his being, as well as his works by nature. He is still subject to the law of desire, to the centrality of his ego, and to the control of his being, as well as his works by nature. Nature is controlling him. Okay? This continues for a long time. Though it is a regulated and governed desire, because even at level 2, okay, we standard of conduct, you have only limited your desire. Okay? No. Very often, you have to just reduce the intensity of your own desire so that you don't get into trouble. Because if you have too much, you apply your own ego, you will always be attacked by others, okay, who have also got their own ego. So there will always be an attack. So you learn in the physical world to temper your own tendencies of egoistic behavior. Okay? So you start reducing them. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble in that sense. Though it is a regulated and governed desire. A clarified ego. Okay, this clarified ego is very interesting. He is talking of the material ego in the animal, the physical ego. The animal does everything only for itself. Eating and anything else that it does is only for itself. Then there is a vital ego. Okay, the vital ego also is very much there. Then there is a mental ego, the sattvic being. It is clarified. It has got a lot of understanding. It is sattvic, but sattvic is not spiritual. Okay? Sattvic is still there is tamas, rajas, and sattva. And even the sattva, there is ego, but it is clarified. Okay? It is much. It loses all its dirt and its heavy colors. It loses. It becomes more whitish, but still it is ego. Okay. So very interesting. This ego. Okay. So, I remember many incidents which show this subtle ego, I'll tell you one incident which is stuck in my mind so strongly. There used to be a gentleman, I won't take his name because all of you know him. He used to be very gentle in all his movements, and even his walking were very slow. He would talk also in a very slow manner. His even physical being was quite, quite a good-looking man, okay? And everything was slow, very slow, and you would normally associate him with a sattvic being. Okay, so he would never lose his temper. Okay, even if his temper is lost, he would be very, very subdued. So, in the press when we were there, we used to have Ayush Puja, and this Ayush Puja is the worship of the instruments that you have. Now that's interesting because that also brings us to the same. You realize that even your instruments are useful to you, and you give them worship. So I've spoken about worship and proper respect. So that is which the Europeans find idiotic. They say, what is this nonsense worshipping your instruments? But in this context, you can see very clearly that there is a lot of meaning in worshipping your instruments, taking care of them, worshipping them, giving them true value. Okay. So in this Ayush Puja, we used to all sit together, and the servants used to. There was one priest who was also he used to work with us. So he used to conduct the puja, and after the puja, they would honor some of the big shots in the press. So there was a European, okay, his name I think all of you know also, Galerong, okay. He used to also work with us in the press. But there was this other gentleman also whom I'm talking, and they were sitting side by side. So his priest, he came with a garland and he came towards them. So this man thought that he is going to be garlanded. Now that's a subtle ego. Okay, you're already expecting to be garlanded. And what happened was very funny. This man came, and for the normal Indian, the Westerners are always superior. Not anymore perhaps, but at that time, I'm talking of 50 years ago, certainly it was a fact. Okay, the Europeans are far superior to us. That sort of feeling was there. So, and then this priest came with a garland and didn't garland the man who was expecting, because he even bent his head low so that he could be garlanded. But this priest went and garlanded Galerong. So it was so funny. The sattvic ego, you can see, he was expecting to garland, but he could not. It was an insult to him. So I'm going on because of the clarified ego. The ego is very much there, but it's very subdued. It's very much more understanding than the tamasic ego and the rajasic ego. Clarified ego. And the nature more and more subtilized and enlightened by the sattvic, the highest natural principle. All this is still within the domain, though very much enlarged domain of the mutable finite, and personal. Now look at these three adjectives: mutable, finite, personal. Level 1, very clearly, our normal consciousness. Okay, level 1. The real self-knowledge and consequently the right way of works lies beyond in level 2. Okay, not in level 1. Level 2, the higher mind, the element mind, the intuitive mind, and the overmind. It lies there, the real self-knowledge. This understanding by the ego that others have a certain value is a mental understanding, and it is good, but it's not spiritual knowledge. The real self-knowledge, spiritual knowledge, and consequently, the right way of works also. You start working, it changes your behavior also. For the sacrifice done with knowledge is the highest sacrifice, and that alone brings a perfect working. So, sattvic understanding of things doesn't change your behavior so much. Outwardly it will, but your inner character, the ego won't disappear. Okay? It will start disappearing only when you go to level 2. Okay? The Brahmic consciousness. The understanding that the universe is the most important. Your ego disappears and you are in no desire and you are in the level 2. The spiritual planes of consciousness. That can only come when he perceives that the self in him and the self in others are one being, and the self is something higher than the ego, an infinite, impersonal, universal existence in whom all move and have their being. So you can call this the Brahmic consciousness, you can also call it the cosmic consciousness. By the way, cosmic consciousness and Brahmic consciousness are the same thing. Okay? Cosmic consciousness can be absent even in a Brahmic consciousness. Okay? So, the cosmic consciousness is I am in everybody and everybody is in me. Okay? It can have many, many grades. So, that's what Swami is saying here. That can only come when he perceives that the self in him and the self in others are one being. This is very clearly the cosmic consciousness. Okay? There's no difference between me and everything is one. And this self is something higher than the ego, that you realize. An infinite, impersonal, universal existence. A perfect definition of the Brahmic consciousness. The nirvana consciousness if you want, or the self. Okay? Atman. This is the description. Infinite, eternal, he has not added. You realize that you have always existed. Eternal, impersonal. Nobody is there. Okay? It's an impersonal force. A universal existence in whom all move and have their being. You become conscious of the universal oneness of things. When he perceives that all the cosmic gods to whom he offers the sacrifice are forms of the one infinite Godhead, and when, again, leaving all his limited and limiting conceptions of that one Godhead, he perceives him to be the supreme and ineffable deity who is at once the finite and the infinite, the one self and the many, beyond nature, though manifesting himself through nature, beyond limitation by qualities, though formulating the power of his own, of his being through infinite quality. Huge sentence, but what he means is the third level, okay, the Purushottama. In fact, this is what he's saying. This is the Purushottama. So let's have a clear look at what he's saying from the beginning. An impersonal universal existence in whom all move and have their being. When he perceives that all the cosmic gods, who are the cosmic gods? Okay, Shiva, okay, Vishnu, Aryaman, okay, Ganesh, Kartik, all these. There's so many, all these are being worshipped in our temples. Okay, Saraswati, okay, Lakshmi, they all worship, these are only gods and goddesses. And you realize that they are only forms of one supreme. There is someone who is even above the gods. And who is that? The Purushottama. And what is the nature of the Purushottama? Srimada's description is very clear. He's saying, then when you get rid of your limited and limiting conceptions. Now that's very interesting. What's the difference between limited and limiting? Limited, yes, I cannot think beyond my mind. That's limited. I cannot, my body is limiting me in every way. But limiting, it does not allow you to go beyond what you have. That also it limits you. It limiting conceptions of the one Godhead. He perceives him to be the supreme and ineffable deity. Who is the supreme and ineffable deity? Level 3, Ishvara, okay, or the Purushottama. Okay? Or Srivada often refers to him as the master and the Lord. Okay? These are the two words he uses for the level 3. Okay? Ineffable, you can't speak about him. Why you can't speak about him? Because he is all the opposites. He is the finite and the infinite. He is the personal and the impersonal. He is the formless and also he can take a form. Okay? The one self and the many. Beyond nature, though manifesting himself through nature. Beyond limitation by qualities. And what is that? Saguna. Though formulating the power as being through infinite quality, Nirguna. So all the opposites are combined in the Purushottama. Level 3. This is the Purushottama to whom the sacrifice has to be offered. Not for any transient personal fruit of works. If you have any transient personal fruit of works, you offer it to the gods. Oh, you go to Tirupati and you make an actual sacrifice. You put even 1 lakh of rupees into the hundi, but you want 10 lakhs more in exchange. Okay? So that's at the God's level, the lower level. But spiritually, you have to go to the Purushottama without any desire and without any demand at all. This is the Purushottama to whom the sacrifice has to be offered. Not for any transient person for the works, but for the soul's possession of God. And in order to live in harmony and union with the divine. And if you are in union with the divine harmony, you will be in harmony with the universe and you will be in harmony with yourself. Okay? Transcendent, cosmic and individual. Is there a harmony between ourselves, in ourselves? No. The mind has got its own wants which the body cannot fulfill. The vital has got also all sorts of wants which the mind may deny, but the body also will deny. Okay? So all these are constant disharmony between mind, life and body. We don't think of it that way, but that's the truth. But when you get the psychic being to come forward, this disharmony starts becoming less and less. So this is what she will say. Grades. The grades of the sacrifice. As I said, there is a shadow of this in the standards of conduct also. There is a gradation. First, the ego, then the social laws that limit your ego, then the willingly cooperating with others and helping others, the ethical laws, morality, okay, philanthropy, okay, altruism, helping others, and finally, doing only jobs for the divine, which is the spiritual laws, where there are no laws at all that bind. All the laws are dismissed in the spiritual life. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam praja. So, 8:39. So we have done 2 paras today. So next time we will start with the in other words. So Srindra is going explaining further in other words. So this will take next time. Okay. Au revoir.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay. Au revoir, everybody.
Thank you, Rangada.
Okay. Have a nice day.
Bonjour, Rangada. Merci.
Hey, Pallavi, Tarika, everybody.